idea, we explore the ethical approach to sustainable consumption, beginning with an understanding of what it means to act ethically and what we consider to be good. By examining these concepts through various lenses, including philosophy, sociology, and economics, we aim to foster a more inclusive and responsible perspective on sustainability, taking into account the needs of both current and future generations. Ethics is a discipline concerned with finding answers to what is right and what is wrong. It is primarily concerned with our decisions and actions. It seeks principles by which we can determine whether something is right or wrong and what we should do. And that begs the question, good for whom? For me, for others, for my group, for my country, or for the world? A Nobel Prize-winning author, Sienkiewicz, in his novel set in colonial times, attributes to an African boy Kali a morality based on the logic, just as what is good for me. We find this in this scene. "Tell me," asks Stash, a white-collared boy, "what is a wicked deed?" "If anyone takes away Kali's cow," he answered after brief reflection, "that then is a wicked deed." "Excellent," exclaimed Stash, "and what is a good one?" This time the answer came without any reflection. "If Kali takes away the cow of somebody else, that is a good deed." Perhaps the mechanism of the transference of an inconvenient truth, known in psychology, has also come into play in this case, because if you look more closely, it reflects not so much the very limited morality attributed to Africans, but the more questionable morality of the colonizing countries, which saw the creation of colonies, the plundering of inhabitants' property and possessions, and the enslavement as a good act in the name of their own values, and the attempts to throw off this yoke as an evil act. Just as we need to be critical of the value system of colonizers who were in power, we should also be critical when we approach the issue of sustainable consumption from an ethical or philosophical perspective, because ethics is part of philosophy. And here we must pose the essential question, familiar to us from sociology: who holds the power? A system of values, norms, and principles can only truly be upheld if it serves the interest and acts on behalf of the interest of the belief system surrounding the researcher who studied the subject. This dynamic, the intertwining of power, interest, and values, was notably identified and explored by the Frankfurt School in Philosophy. This is why feminist scholars have turned to this school of thought in order to emphasize that a given problem or phenomenon is assessed only from a male perspective to the exclusion of the female, where the emphasis is not so much on the differences between men and women, although this has varied in successive phases of the development of feminism, but on the differences in power between men and women. We can think, debate, and legislate about the division of roles in the family, evident in the regulation of leave, procreation, education, work, creating norms, regulations, and moral judgments based on a single male perspective. Meanwhile, according to the UN, climate change is not gender neutral, and therefore climate action needs women. This is because women in developing countries are often more dependent on natural resources to which they have limited access due to climate pollution. They also bear a disproportionate responsibility for providing food, water, and care in their communities. They are also more vulnerable to violence in conflict situations, including those related to climate change. We should therefore take a more inclusive approach to analyzing a phenomenon that is take into account the perspectives of the other, the excluded, the left out, being aware of the tendency to exclude them or to assign them categories: inferior, weaker, less competent, self-inflicted. There's a similar exclusion of weaker perspectives when we talk about sustainability or sustainable consumption. It is easy for rich, developed countries to forget the perspective of poor countries. It is also easy for countries at low or moderate risk of climate crisis to overlook the situation of countries at risk of such crisis. For example, coastal, island or drought-prone regions. Similarly, it is easy for countries facing a refugee crisis to close their eyes to the perspective of countries not facing such a crisis. For example, where there are no refugees or where refugees do not arrive. But let's go back to the question, what does good mean? You will recall from economics that those implicit behaviors that are recognized as good are those that are efficient. It is behaviors in the execution of which we make the most optimal use of resources. We have an expression of this, for example, in the SDG strategy, according to which the energy efficiency of the production and use of finished products should be improved from the daily of. But it may be useful to extend our basic economic models to include externalities. This would involve defining good as a state in which the negative consequences, particularly those relating from our actions, are internalized. This would require those who cause pollution to bear the associated costs. The polluter pays principle reflects these concepts of a just and fair approach to defining what is considered good. As you can see, the ethical perspective of judging the actions of some as better than others, the attitudes of some as better than others, is not alien to other disciplines. We sometimes adopt it implicitly, indirectly, but it is a certain meta-category that we cannot do without. It is implicit in our evaluations of behavior, actions, programs, policies. Sometimes what serves more people is better. What is better is fairer, more effective, more inclusive. And what does ethics have to say about this? To find out, I invite you to the next lecture.